The day I accepted the position as a fire lookout in the heart of Montana's vast wilderness, I couldn't have imagined what awaited me. My job was simple, or so it seemed. Live in a tower, perched high above the whispering pines for a season, watching for the faintest sign of smoke in the endless green below. It was supposed to be a peaceful, albeit solitary way to spend the summer, surrounded by nothing but nature's unspoiled beauty. Yet, what happened to me was something far beyond the realm of my normal tasks. My first couple weeks passed without incident. I spent my days scanning the horizon and my nights under a blanket of stars, the silence broken only by the occasional crackle of my walkie-talkie. It was my lifeline, my only means of communication, connecting me to another lookout tower just miles away. But one night, that lifeline would be the start of a story that soon shattered my isolated blanket of safety. I had been taking a short break at the base of the tower, stretching my legs as the evening sun began to bathe the forest in a pastel orange. My walkie-talkie crackled and a familiar voice came through.
Ryan at Pinnacle Point, this is Sarah in Cliffside. Do you copy?
Sarah, my supervisor, was stationed just a few miles away at Cliffside Tower. She was very laid back and easygoing. You do your job, do it well, and all was smooth sailing from there. Despite the geographical proximity of our towers, there was a subtle power dynamic at play. Sarah could easily observe and, if she chose to, micromanage my activities from her vantage point. Yet in this balanced equation, I also had the same capabilities. The reason I bring this up is because it plays a role in the events that later unfold.
Yep, I copy,
I responded. Another crackle came through.
Hey, I just got some sight of an unauthorized fire coming from somewhere near your area. I'd advise investigating. Let me know what you find. Over.
She replied. I frowned.
Yeah, I will do. On my way. Over.
I climbed up the creaky stairs of the lookout and pulled out my binoculars. Sure enough, a short distance in the west was a pencil-thin line of smoke rising through the trees.
Hate to be the guy that spoils someone's camping, but looks like I gotta.
Fires were prohibited at this time in the forest, especially being dry season, with the vegetation tinder dry and the risk of wildfires being critical. Any unauthorized flames could easily escalate into a disaster. It wasn't just about unfortunately spoiling someone's camping trip. It was about protecting the forest and its wildlife from potential devastation. I grabbed my pack and began walking down the small trail that would eventually lead me to the destination I was aiming for. The gentle whoosh in the pines sounded so lonely. The fact I was literally alone must have added to the sensation, but it was like a bittersweet memory with the gentle wind and golden light through the trees. Nostalgic almost, like I was homesick for a place I'd never been. About a half hour or so slipped by, and the smell of wood smoke became more apparent. I could also make out what appeared to be a small camp through the trees. As I neared entry, I began to announce myself.
Hello, I'm Ryan, one of the rangers in the area. I noticed your fire from my lookout and
My voice trailed off when I realized there was no one around to hear me, or at least that I could see. There was a small tent that appeared to have some damage. A torn flannel lay battered in the dirt. There could be countless explanations, but this made me really uneasy. Not your typical or expected scenario. No. Something about this gave off a sense of dread and urgency. I scanned my surroundings for a bit as my nerves began to grow. I stomped out the fire and reported my findings back to Sarah. Her words were reassuring, but I have no doubt it was just to help keep me composed. I could hear the suspicion in her voice. the uncertainty in her tone as she nonchalantly hinted at me to return to my lookout. I kept a keen eye and ear out for everything on my way back. I'd most likely get back to my tower as soon as it became dark, and I hated the thought of that. I had just crossed one of the trail markers that made me recognize that I was now close to my lookout, when my walkie-talkie began to go off again.
Ryan, it's me again. Everything okay over there?
She asked. Thinking nothing of it, I responded, figuring she was just checking in since she knew I'd been out and I hadn't reported my return yet.
Yeah, I didn't make as great time coming back. I'm good though.
Okay, I just wanted to make sure. I was doing a scan and noticed your flashlight over at your tower.
I stopped in my tracks, frozen and unable to reply.
Ryan?
I could hear Sarah on the other end. Sarah, that flashlight you saw? It wasn't me. I'm about 10 minutes out from my tower still.
What? Well, if you're not there, then who is?
Sarah said, her voice growing more anxious, although she was trying to remain calm. Look, I didn't come out here to get murdered, okay? What's going on? I replied in a hushed tone now, my heart sitting in my throat. Sarah told me to stay where I was for a moment, while she scanned over by my tower again, the night only growing darker from here. The couple of minutes she was away felt like decades, and my feeling of impending doom began to worsen. I focused on my breathing so I wouldn't break into a panic, and I turned the volume on my walkie-talkie down. She finally came in again.
I lost sight of them. I can't see a light anywhere. Listen, please be cautious. You saw a small camp nearby. If anything, it could just be someone out here trying to rummage supplies. Don't take any risks, okay?
My heart was thudding at this point, as my fight or flight response kicked into overdrive. I had to force my legs to move. I had a flashlight of my own, but with what just became known to me, I didn't dare turn it on. To me, it seemed as though it would make me a target, a beacon just begging to be hunted. I tried to tell myself over and over that this was just a hermit maybe, harmless, someone trying to scrounge off the land. But the other side of me kept whispering that this was a cold-blooded killer, someone deranged, someone seeking a victim. Isolation, paranoia, and panic is a deadly cocktail for the mind. The dark and almost menacing silhouette of my lookout was now in clear view as I remained skulking about the forest floor. I widened my eyes, trying to adjust them to the dark as much as I could, listening. Oh, how I was listening. For anything, but especially approaching footsteps. No signs of danger thus far, so I began to ascend the old wooden stairs, my fist clenched tightly around my flashlight, partially because of nerves, but also in case I needed a blunt weapon. I checked all around my deck and my living space. Nothing. Normally, I would have turned on my kerosene lanterns, but I weirdly felt safe, obscured by the night. I reported back to Sarah that I was back in my tower and all was clear, and then she made a report on the events. That night, I had the most fitful rest in my life. In fact, I barely slept at all. Every time the wind blew and the tower would creak, I would mistake it for someone knocking. The breeze began to sound more like whispers, and I practically tortured myself by staring out at the tree line, constantly expecting to see a figure just standing in the distance, watching, waiting. My tower was still cloaked in darkness, for I feared any light source would only make me vulnerable, easy to assess. It was from that moment on, when the morning sun painted the horizon in hues of crimson and gold, that I truly knew I wasn't alone. Sarah checked in with me a lot more after that, but there was never anything found, nothing more to determine who was lurking around my tower that night. And though my anxiety gradually subsided as the days went on without further incidents, it was a long, long summer. A few of my friends and I are big on the outdoors. As much as we enjoy our times watching movies or chilling on games together, we like to get out to explore, whether it's aimlessly cruising, late night walks around our small town, or finding places nearby to adventure off to. We often come up with something. One of my friends, T, recently had a birthday and was gifted a pretty nice drone. He and his sister, AJ, both take a huge interest in cinematics. I've grown to know that when we're out exploring, I need to stop every so often so they can capture some recordings, and so I don't lose them. Sometimes it drives me crazy, but a passion is a passion. T was really looking forward to getting his new drone up and running. He had texted me that morning telling me to come over after he got it set up. It was a still and warm day outside, so I knew we would drive out somewhere and spend the day outdoors. I grabbed my stuff, hit one of the nearby gas stations for some drinks and snacks, and soon was pulling up to the house. T was already out in the front yard looking up at the sky, his drone emitting a soft hum as it hovered. I hopped out of my truck chuckling as I made a comment about his already clear obsession for this thing. AJ soon burst through the front door as she greeted me excitedly, waving her hand. We talked in their front yard for a short bit, as T repeatedly messed with the drone settings and referred to the user guide. We watched curiously as he tried different modes, trying to adjust everything to where he was most comfortable, and before too long, the three of us made our way to my truck. "Hey, let's go to our spot by the river so I can practice some videos," T said. "Hold on. You sure the river is the first place you want to officially fly?" I asked, with a chuckle as I looked over at him. He nodded, tapping my dashboard as I put my truck in drive. About 30 minutes on the road, we pulled into the small dirt area that connected to a couple of trailheads. The area around the river trails was densely wooded and isolated, but there were a couple of decent clearings, and the river itself didn't have much tree cover. We all hopped out and T began unpacking his drone, once again messing with settings, and AJ and I broke into some of the drinks I brought. Soon the drone was once again airborne, and T came over to show us as we could all watch the view from the controller screen. I have to admit, seeing everything from a bird's eye view was pretty cool. I eventually left T to his flying as I walked around the area. The gentle babbling of the river and the warmth of the sun could just about lull me into an afternoon nap. I picked up some stones to skip, and AJ soon joined in as we laughed, reminisced, and carried on in good conversation. A handful of minutes later, T suddenly spoke up, his tone sounding intrigued about something. "Whoa, come over here, look at this," he said, as he motioned us to him. His hand covered the controller from the glare of the sun as he zoomed in a little bit. There on the screen was an aerial view of a derelict-looking house, engulfed by a thicket of trees. "There's been an abandoned house out here all this time?" I asked, leaning in with more curiosity. We all watched as T pulled up the GPS, which showed the drone's flight path, and then an H, which meant home, showing where we were located. The drone wasn't all too far from us, maybe a quarter of a mile down the river, and a little ways out into the woods. "Guys," AJ began, "I think we need to investigate." Wait, hold on," I replied. "Can you get your drone any lower? so we can see if it's legit abandoned?
Man, okay, let me try. I don't want to crash this thing. I just got it.
T replied, as he ever so slowly lowered the drone. We all watched as it got lower and lower, T taking ages as he was afraid of the propellers colliding with the tops of foliage. Despite the top-down view, we couldn't see anything out of the ordinary. The house was definitely dilapidated and barren looking enough, so we felt even more compelled to check it out. Probably not the most logical idea, I know, finding a random abandoned house that you have no idea about, and the first thought is how to get inside. But there was something about the adrenaline and the thrill that the three of us loved, something about the mystery of these places. So it definitely wasn't uncommon. I grabbed my pack from the truck and stuffed in the snacks and drinks that I brought for us. T recalled his drone and packed it in his own bag. Then the three of us started to trudge down the skinny trail that followed the river. Based off the location from the drone, we estimated where we thought the house to be until eventually, we noticed an area where the grasses and foliage looked worn down, a narrow and overgrown path leading into the woods.
Okay, I don't want to be the idiot who gets us lost out here, but I think this may be our way,
T said, as we neared the barely visible path. Ugh, imagine all the bugs we might run into going through that, AJ chimed in.
Seriously? I asked. You're worried about getting lost. You're worried about bugs, and I'm worried about, I don't know, getting murdered?
While I said this in a partially humorous tone, there was some seriousness and anxiety in the air that lingered. Like I said, my friends and I are big on the outdoors, and as for abandoned places, this is far from our first one. But the way this one was enveloped, swallowed by the looming trees overhead, created a knot in my throat. We were well away from any civilization on this one, and diving headfirst into something we weren't prepared for. Nonetheless, we ducked and wedged our way in through the grasses and leaves as we continued our trek for about another 15 minutes when finally, it was revealed. The old house that had been spotted earlier from about 200 feet in the air. It was a small place, the walls cracked and weathered, and the windows broken with nothing but a shadowy darkness behind them. I playfully nudged T ahead of us as I told him, finders keepers. He lightheartedly told me to knock it off as we all approached as one, our slow movements clearly stating that none of us were itching to get inside. As I was eyeing the splintered and faded sign out front which read condemned, the flutter of wings from a nearby nesting bird sent a jolt through me. Cautiously, we stepped foot in, and the floors cracked and groaned in protest.
Okay, I'm getting a weird vibe,
AJ spoke up, as she was the last to cross over the front door, her face scrunched up slightly. T and I stopped for a moment, looking back to check on her.
Come on, you were so invested,
he began jokingly. Are you all right? She nodded hesitantly, rubbing her hand along her upper arm as she began to glance around. The air inside was cold without any presence from the sun. There were dusty books and broken furniture scattered about, piles of crumbled debris, and even an old piano that lay on the ground without legs. As many other abandoned buildings, there were a few spots with strange and, of course, edgy graffiti on the walls. Not written or spray painted, though. These had been carved. One of the beams had the phrase, "Please save us," repeatedly etched into it. Although eerie, it's not uncommon for things like this in abandoned ruins. Other people are bound to have discovered it before you, and given the already eerie atmosphere, decided to add on to it, but something stuck out to me. There was no other graffiti besides the strange carved phrases. No typical so-and-so was here. No tags, no drawings, no anything. There was a small room to the left that had the windows boarded up. It was almost pitch black inside, even in the middle of the day. As curious as I was, I refrained from stepping foot in that room. In fact, I noticed even AJ and T avoided it. AJ especially. As we moved through the house a little more, we noticed more odd phrases. Another one saying, "Something bad happened here. Please send your blessings." It was carved into part of the wall right above some candles. Candles that had been burned down to nothing but puddles of hardened wax. T had spotted another up by the ceiling, strangely enough. This one read, "Can you see them?" We'd occasionally glance at each other. At this point, all of us thinking the same thing. Let's get the hell out of Dodge. Not even one split second went by, when suddenly, one single key from the old piano played. It was quick and hauntingly out of tune, as if one of us were to go over and quickly just hit one of the keys. Strangely enough, we were all on the opposite side of the room, away from the piano. The wind couldn't have done that. At this point, AJ seemed to teleport outside as she instantly fled the house, leaving T and I dumbfounded as my heartbeat started to quicken.
I'm telling you, this place is giving me awful energy.
She yelled at us from outside, pacing at a distance. I don't know why, but my eyes drifted back to that pitch black room. I felt as though I couldn't look away, like I was frozen in place. T ended up having to shove me to get me moving again, and within seconds, we were free from those decaying walls. I exhaled sharply as we jogged clear away from the derelict property, twigs and leaves catching in my clothes.
Yeah, let's go ahead and put this down on the never again list,
T said breathily as he glanced back at the house one final time. AJ was already steps ahead of us. We got out of there, alive. But that house has remained a peak topic for us since the day we found it. What was in the room that none of us looked in? What happened there? The messages, the heavy feeling, the key being played. I can't pick apart if it was something sinister or something just psychological. And you know what? I never will.